I'm Dr Jam Kothari.
And I'm Dr Sally Moore. And this is a Myeloma Minutes, a podcast for people affected by myeloma, patients, friends and family.
Hello, Sally. Good afternoon. Great to see you again for another episode of the pod.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I'm really excited about this one. We've got some news, haven't we, for our listeners?
Special guest today, and we're delighted to be welcoming onto the podcast Dr Sophie Castell. She is the CEO of Myeloma UK, which is the leading charity for those affected by myeloma in the United Kingdom. She is a fantastic person, and we're so excited to be having this discussion with her over the next 45 minutes. She's got a background as a research scientist, but after her PhD, she has moved into the commercial sector, and she's worked for some huge companies such as Coca-Cola and Unilever, and she's also run her own consultancy practice. She's also worked as a non-executive director in the NHS and been a trustee with a number of charities, including the National Autistic Society and Home Start UK. She's also been involved in setting up a new charity called the Enterprise Cooperative Trust, which aims to improve education and life opportunities for young people in her local community. It's fantastic that she is leading Myeloma UK. She is a passionate advocate of patient-centred approaches to support and addressing inequalities in health, care and welfare. We are delighted to welcome her today on the podcast.
Really, really pleased to be here and to be joining you. I think if you'd met me as a teenager and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have said I either want to be a scientist or an opera singer. And I kind of feel that those two things have kind of wound their way through my career. So I did start off as a scientist. I did a PhD in biochemistry, and I really, really enjoyed that. And I think that kind of scientific training has always stood me in good stead. Coming out of that, I worked in industry. I think I wanted to work in a commercial environment. And so I sort of translated that research training into market research. And I got really involved in innovation and product development and using research to create useful products and services. Loved doing that. I then spent some time working for Coca-Cola, which again was something at the time was a really important part of my professional development, I guess. I was out in the States, and whilst I was in the States, my son was born. When we came back to the UK, he was diagnosed as autistic. And I think that was the thing that then tipped me into working in the third sector and thinking about kind of impact more broadly. I spent quite a long time on the board of the National Autistic Society, but I also worked locally. I set up a local support group. I supported a young autistic woman to set up an adult support group. And I think from that, what I took away was within the disability world, there's that mantra, nothing about us without us. And that became really important to me, that the people that an organisation is there to serve need to be at the heart of that organisation. When we were getting the Autism Act through Parliament, I ran and designed quite a lot of the consultation work in my local area. And I then went and worked for RNIB for about 5 years. Over that period, obviously working with blind people, I've worked with autistic people, and I love getting to know different communities and understanding the needs and the unmet needs of those different communities, and then advocating for them and looking at how we could design services to support people to be able to thrive and to take a full part in society. That was sort of my background within the third sector, was very much working with different communities of people with additional needs. And then the role at Myeloma UK came up, and I looked at it and I thought, what an amazing organisation. Because I feel it genuinely, its history is of being very centred on supporting people with myeloma, being that advocating voice. And so I thought that felt like, for me, the next step was to be involved in an organisation that really had that advocacy at its heart.
So, Sophie, that sounds like quite an incredible and also a personal journey, and to bring that wealth of expertise to Myeloma UK. I mean, how fortunate we are in the myeloma community to benefit from all that knowledge and skill that you bring. We'd like to get into the nitty-gritty of Myeloma UK in a bit more detail, but before we do that, as a sort of quick overview, is there anything that inspires you in particular day to day about your role?
I've been at Myeloma UK now about 3.5 years. Every day I get up with some very, very inspirational stories. My email inbox is always full of people telling me, either personally as patients patients or family members, what they're doing, what their experience is, or I've got colleagues who are out there engaging and hearing those stories. So I think my day-to-day inspiration just comes from knowing that we can make an impact in the lives of people who are living with myeloma. A lot of cancer charities either focus on funding medical research or they focus on direct patient support. We do both of those. And we do all of the work advocating to make sure that the new treatments that are coming downstream are available to everyone in the UK that needs them. So it's quite an organisation of our size, that's a very broad spread of things we do. And I find that very exciting. I like the idea that we are, in a sense, a one-stop shop, that we do fund research, that we do directly support people. And then we are a powerful advocacy voice.
Sophie, I mean, Myeloma UK has been such a big part of my whole career as a myeloma clinician. I really fondly remember open days, the info days that we've done in Oxford, and every week, you've got to make sure you've got enough. The patient information sheets are just incredible, right? Sally, we always check the cupboard and it's like, do we have enough orange information sheets? Because
totally, completely.
Fantastic. And the carousel. So we have a carousel in the Oxford clinic and everything is covered. And if we're running low on any of them, I get very nervous. And no, I don't get nervous often in clinic. It's like, guys, we're running low on smoldering myeloma, or we're running low on this. But, the information sheets, the website, having worked with you, it's such a pleasure to have you today. And I think, Sophie, you'd agree, Myeloma UK has come a long way. And part of that is because, of course, how myeloma has changed. We moved from what has often, sadly, for many people been a devastating, very life-limiting illness. And now in more situations, we're talking about survivorship and minimizing long-term toxicities because things have improved so much. So if you're thinking about now, Blood Cancer Awareness Month, September 2025. What are the key focus areas for Myeloma UK right now?
The landscape has changed. So if you go back to when we started up a little bit over 25 years ago, someone diagnosed with myeloma could expect to live for possibly 2 years. Survival rates have basically quadrupled over that time. So it's hugely, hugely positive. And I think you're right, certainly for a group of patients, we are at a point where we can start thinking about there being a functional cure. There are people living long enough and on treatments that are keeping them not only alive, but with good lives, that we can start thinking in those terms. And I think that then means that we've got some different challenges to think about. So when we redid our strategy a couple of years ago, what we were trying to do was take a step back and say, given that change, what do we need to start doing? The heart of what we do, we are always going to be here to make sure that we are supporting patients living with myeloma today. Increasingly, those treatments will become more personalised, more relevant to individuals, and we are very keen to support that kind of move as we can do. As people are living longer, then that living well survivorship agenda is now more important. Go back 10 years, it was a less important thing. Now it is very important. And whether it's for longer term side effects of living on treatment, whether it is the impact of the myeloma itself, we need to start looking at how we can support people to live good lives as well as long lives. So that strand of our strategy, living well, is very important. And then the other thing that we want to really start thinking about is it possible to actually prevent people getting myeloma? And I think prevention, historically, we've thought about broadly lifestyle factors, but actually for conditions like myeloma where there are precursor conditions, then conceptually you think you should be able to intervene upstream and find ways of preventing full-blown myeloma from developing. And so that is understanding more about MGUS and about smouldering. And there are a lot of unanswered questions there just in the basic biology of what's happening. That's a longer term burn, I guess, in terms of having impact. But we do want to start thinking about that. So we think about our sort of strategy, our impact in what are we doing with treatments for myeloma? What are we doing to help patients live good quality lives? And then increasingly, is there a way of looking at prevention?
Thank you very much. And just because now you can spend time and resource talking about prevention, in a way that is really testament to how far myeloma treatment has come, because there wasn't headspace for that before, because so much of the focus was on trying to get people to live longer. I mean, if I can just ask you a bit more about that space, are there specific areas and ways in which Myeloma UK are working with the wider myeloma clinician community in that space?
We will be publishing a precursor framework document, which is a discussion document, in the next month or so. We hosted some international roundtable discussions last year. That was fascinating. I mean, we had people from the US join us. We had clinicians from the UK. We had patients, and really just thinking about what the challenges are, both in terms of, as I say, understanding some of the basic biology, to managing precursors, to, is the potential at some point in the future for a screening program, all of those things. And so that was a very, very rich discussion, which we are then bringing to fruition with some recommendations this year. We have an early diagnosis steering group, which again brings clinicians together, initially focused very much on the earlier detection of full-blown myeloma, but increasingly that group will start looking at the more upstream work. So I think at the moment it's very much a question of establishing the right questions to be asking, because there's not 100% clinical consensus between, say, what we do in the UK and what happens in the US. And so it's really about understanding what are the key things that we need to be advocating for or funding research in to look at how we can advance the prevention agenda.
I mean, that's fascinating. And I think we're all looking forward to seeing that document. And actually, I think Myeloma UK and other myeloma charities have a really important role in this space because, as you very diplomatically put it, Sophie, honestly, you put 5 myeloma clinicians in a room and get them to agree about smouldering myeloma. Myeloma doctors are generally a non-aggressive bunch, but, there is a lot of disagreement. And then, of course, some of that is understandable. It's the patient and the people affected by it that we need to focus on. And sometimes I think, Sally, I'm sure you agree that we don't feel that we can focus on this group of patients maybe as much as we would like to because of, time constraints and other issues. It's so important. And we've gone past the stage where we can just say we don't treat it because it's not symptomatic, or we don't treat it because it doesn't change the natural history, because these things are changing all the time.
I think it just speaks to the fact that the ambition of Myeloma UK, if you don't mind me suggesting, Sophie, that you're not scared to go into these rather grey, slightly contentious areas where actually there may be solutions where, we as individuals may struggle to really shine a light on those areas. So I think it's fabulous that Myeloma UK is prepared to sort of push the boundaries in that regard and really challenge us, the clinical community, in terms of how we approach looking after these patients. And I couldn't agree more with you, Jam, in terms of the contention around particularly treating smouldering myeloma and precursor diseases. And actually, I might have a very particular opinion about this, as you might, Jam. In fact, I think we both do. But actually, we think we're right. But are we right? Who knows? Myeloma UK can give us an independent steer. So actually, this is what our patients think. This is what our families think. This is where it's important, and bring us back to that reality of this is why we're all doing what we do. So just to celebrate really the work that you're doing and how much it informs our practice as well as supporting patients.
I see our role as sort of twofold. We are the voice, we are advocates, we bring that patient perspective into the discussion. And then on the basis of that, we can be a catalyst. So I think what we can do is be the convener of discussions, we can catalyse that discussion, and we can do that across the clinical community, bringing that patient voice. And then, increasingly also talking to government and NICE and people like that.
We touched on survivorship, and, we are now in clinic seeing certain groups of patients saying, I think you may only need one treatment. Your life expectancy should be normal. And there are certain groups of patients who absolutely, fit into this category. But more generally, survivorship, minimizing toxicities. How is Myeloma UK involved in the survivorship space at the moment? I suppose importantly, how do you see that changing over the next 5-10 years?
I see there are sort of broadly 2 things that we can be looking at. One is looking at the sort of psychological burden of living with this kind of condition. Patients say things like it's like living on an unexploded volcano. You don't know when it's going to erupt again. So I think there's something about the psychological consequences of something that is incurable and relapsing remitting. And I think now we've got the space to start thinking about that kind of broader psychological support. And then I think the other part of it is the sort of physical health side of either toxicities of drugs, side effects of drugs, or just simply living longer with the condition. We funded last year and this year some work looking at associated circulatory thrombotic kind of of consequences. There was a lot of sort of hearsay around some drug side effects. And so we've looked at a sort of systematic review, looked at our own research, and we've started to. So that's really something about the longer term consequences of the condition and or treatments. We had a grant call last year, our first survivorship grant call. I think we bring something quite different maybe to other research funders, and also where we have our own in-house researchers. So in addition to funding external biomedical research, we have an in-house team of applied health researchers who basically do survey-based research, talking to patients about the experience of living with myeloma. So we've got quite a lot of our own rich data sources, which means that our understanding of patients and their experience, some of that comes from what we get through our info line and our Ask the Nurse service and that kind, and then some of it comes through our own survey research. And so we're able to use all of that to start looking at what are the consequences, what are the side effects that people are most concerned about.
I think what's interesting about that is, once again, you are able to bring the patient experience and the patient voice to the forefront of that research portfolio. And arguably a lot of the research, which has really been so groundbreaking in myeloma, has often focused on therapeutics and perhaps less so on the patient experience, although increasingly we are seeing that in clinical studies. So I think it's really exciting to hear about the work that you do. You know the outcomes that matter most to patients and their relatives in a way that perhaps the clinical teams or the academics are slightly more removed from. And so I guess I just want to celebrate that survivorship piece in particular, because I think it's so incredibly important. I mean, I'd be really interested actually to hear what our listeners think about that. You know, I'm coming up with a lot of assumptions here, but I would think that is the case. So yes, just to celebrate that work that you do.
Absolutely. And Sophie, you mentioned your info line and the various ways in which you get feedback from all those affected by myeloma, because it can, of course, vary in so many ways. Are there certain themes of feedback that you consistently hear, or is it very, very mixed?
I think the bottom line is it's quite mixed. Yeah, everyone's experience is individual experience. We get a lot of calls from people who are newly diagnosed or families of people who are newly diagnosed. You know, myeloma is quite a complex condition and the treatment pathway is very complex. So we do get a lot of questions just as people at that early stage when people are kind of trying to understand the diagnosis, what does it mean for them? So that's a very, very common kind of set of questions. We get a lot of interest in, you know, specific new drugs. Are they right for me? How do they work? You know, where do I get access from them? So I think those are probably the two most common types of questions that we have.
We're hoping to do a pod relatively soon, I think, with some of the nurses that run the info lines to really get their experience of what it's like picking up, you know, the phone to people when they're asking all these questions and sort of amplifying that a little bit through the podcast. We're really sort of delighted to announce that Myeloma UK is going to be the official sort of charity partner for the Myeloma Minutes podcast. And we're absolutely thrilled to be working with you to bring information closer to all of those affected by myeloma.
Oh my God, I'm just going to come here, Jam. So thrilled, so honoured. Honestly, if I could have like virtual champagne bottles popping, I mean, I love a bit of champagne. At this point in time, I would. Sophie, it's such a privilege and we're so delighted to begin this journey now together to see how we can take this forward.
The excitement is mutual, let's put it that way. So no, I'm really delighted that we're doing this. I think you guys are doing such a fantastic job. It's really wonderful to have two eminent haematologists who want to kind of contribute into the community and in this way. It feels like a very uncertain journey, I think, for a lot of people, especially immediately after their diagnosis. And I think this type of communication, so that people both have the information but also feel that they've got that supportive community, is really important.
Such flattery, Sophie. I love it. It's brilliant. Let's keep it up. We have to do another recording in a year's time and hopefully it'll be along the same lines.
Yeah.
In terms of not just a podcast, but Myeloma UK more generally, I mean, Where do you see things, let's say, in a year's time or 5 years' time for Myeloma UK and the work that you guys are doing?
So I do think, partnership is a really big part of that. We can't do everything on our own, and we are always stronger together. I mean, going back to what I was sort of saying at the beginning about my experience working with disability groups and disability charities, that nothing about us is important, but also making sure that everyone is kind of working together. We are stronger together, basically. So I do see us doing more partnership working in the future, be that this type of partnership, looking at our research portfolio. So I think that's a big part of it. There is a big issue around inequalities within myeloma. That ranges, it's a number of different things. So basically, myeloma is more prevalent amongst Black people, and yet they also have longer times to diagnosis, which, given that myeloma has one of the longest times to diagnosis of any cancer, is obviously even more concerning. There is work that we need to do in that way. Some of the new treatments are really exciting, but again, if they need to be delivered within a specialist centre, that's going to have some inequalities in terms of people having access to it. I do think in a range of different ways that inequalities agenda is really, really important, and I want us to be working very actively on that, and we've already started doing some things this year. And I think the other thing is, for us, as I said, when we were talking about this sort of survivorship agenda, one of those things is looking at things from a psychologically informed lens. So increasingly, our direct support services will start taking that kind of approach. So I think there's a lot. And I think the other thing for us is, the drug pipeline is looking very exciting. There are a lot more drugs in development. Which is, very, very, very exciting for the myeloma community. But again, given the work that we need to do to support the introduction of those, having, expert patients at NICE, working with industry partners, that just means there's a lot more work to be done. So we need to start thinking about how we support all of that additional work.
Well, yeah, and without being too glib, we wonder if you could support us in helping us to pronounce these names. Oh my word! Some of them, no matter how many times I get nervous just thinking, oh my God, that name of that drug's coming up in the sentence.
I know.
It's quite extraordinary.
I have to prepare. If I know I'm going to be talking to somebody about some of them, I go away and just practice saying the name.
CAR Ts are especially challenging, and this sort of leads me into my next question, Sophie. Just in terms of access to therapy, this is something that we talk about to our patients all the time in clinic. Appropriately, they get information from a variety of sources and will get sent emails, or they'll bring in clippings. And, there is a very sort of robust and structured way in which we get access to therapies within the United Kingdom, slightly different in different geographical locations. But sort of how do Myeloma UK influence the process of access to new therapies? And do you see your role evolving in that space at all?
If you think about the broad kind of buckets of things we do, research is foundational important, but it's quite a long-term impact. All of the work we do directly supporting people, again, that's the heart of our community. It's really important. And it's one person at a time that we're helping. That access work is work that immediately has a benefit for a whole cohort of people. So it's a really, really important part of what we do. I see our role in a number of different ways. So one is, as drugs come through the process of coming into the UK, obviously that appraisal by NICE is really important. And so we have a key role in making sure that patients who have had experience of a particular drug during its trial are able to articulate and talk about the benefits of that treatment. And that is complementary, obviously, to the data, the actual trial data, which is critical for what NICE need to see. It brings a real focus, and it highlights the actual experience that patients have. So that's really important. I think the other part that we have is in some of the broader conversations between industry and government. And our role there, we're not going to be telling anyone how they should price drugs or things like that, but we are there to hold it to account, both the sort of government side of things and the industry side of things, and say, we're here to represent patients. What we need is a system that works. We need a system that works for the UK, i.e. drugs are here. we're paying an appropriate price for them, but they are available and patients can get access to them. So I think our role as a catalyst, as a convener, and importantly, holding both sides of that equation to account is really important.
Having myself and Sally have both sat in as clinician experts on these appraisal meetings, and I have to say the patient voice that is advocated through Myeloma UK, it always comes across, extremely clearly and eloquently, and it makes a very significant difference.
Yeah, and we've had some amazing, drugs this year. I mean, the bispecifics at fourth line is transformational for people. We've had some world firsts, the Trojan horse. There have been some great successes this year, and it's just important to have the patient voice there in those discussions.
Absolutely. As you know, the NHS is in a very challenging space at the moment, financially, and all clinicians are stretched across all specialities. And if we think about hematology clinicians, specialist nurses, how can Myeloma UK help and support the workforce whilst, of course, still championing patient needs?
So this year we launched our HCP Hub, which is a website dedicated to healthcare professionals. And we are looking to build that and make it even more engaging. So we've launched it, but we've got plans to look at how we can use that to get information out, to drive conversations. So we see that as a really, really important part. We partner with the UKMS, UK Myeloma Society, on education webinars. And I think that's really important. They bring the content to that. They know what people want to have webinars on, but we help host it. We bring again the patient perspective into that. So we do have that kind of partnership working in education. And then we do have our myeloma nurse training program, which again, we will be updating and upgrading over the next year or so. There are ways in which we can be there and support. And we're always open to ideas on that one. I know, as you said earlier, our, the patient information, I think it's useful for patients, but I think nurses and other clinicians find it very helpful to be able to give that out. And we're always open to new ideas of how we can support the clinical workforce. We really appreciate it's a difficult time at the moment.
And if I could just come in here, Sophie, I think it's so true. And I know that my nursing colleagues in particular turn to Myeloma UK for reliable, robust, up-to-date evidence. And they know that it's rock solid, but also accessible. And so actually the training resources that you provide for the wider community, I think are very much appreciated. To move on a little bit to that, I'm just thinking about our audience, and our audience, we're blessed, Sophie. It's really quite international, actually, which is just extraordinary. So shout out to everyone, who's not from the UK joining us. But I'm just wondering, do you find that you get much interest from overseas, either from patients and their relatives or from healthcare professionals sort of beyond these waters?
Yes, and we do. We do make our materials available in other countries. We do have people coming from different parts of the world to our website. We do have meetings and relationships with other myeloma organisations, Australia, Canada, in particular across the world. So we're very keen to be able to work collaboratively. We're also a member of Myeloma Patients Europe, which is the Europe-wide organisation of patient organisations, very keen on working in partnership in that way. So earlier this year, we partnered with the Race Equality Foundation to start exploring some of the inequalities in myeloma. And specifically, Black people are 2 to 3 times more likely to get myeloma. They have 30% longer delays in getting the diagnosis. And that's in a condition where people get delays in diagnosis anyway. So myeloma has one of the longest times to diagnosis, and Black people experience even longer delays. And so we wanted to do a piece of work that really explored why that is so and what we can then do to bring those delays in diagnosis down. So our campaign is called Knowledge is Power. We are launching it in Blood Cancer Awareness Month, and it is to raise awareness of myeloma within the Black community and to start conversations about myeloma. So this is the first stage of what will be a multi-stage partnership with the Race Equality Foundation. You will see further phases of the campaign rolling out over the next couple of years. And so this is really the start of that work. And it is really, really important. The impact that myeloma has in the lives of people who are diagnosed with it is obviously very profound. And we want to make sure that everyone, irrespective of their background, where they live, has access to all of the treatments that are available nowadays.
Wow, what an important and exciting piece of work, Sophie. We look forward to hearing the updates in due course, and best of luck with that going forward. If you were to say one thing at night that keeps you awake and just plays on your mind in terms of either what you want to achieve or what you've heard that day, what would it be?
I think there's something about the scale of the task. As I said earlier, the changes that have happened in myeloma treatment are incredibly encouraging and give so much hope to people. And then when you look forward and you see sort of other developments, it is all very, very positive. So that's great. The flip side of that coin is we need to be able to keep up with it. We need to be able to carry on transforming people's lives and experiences as we have done in the past. So I suppose if there's one thing that keeps me awake at night, it is just the scale of the task, which is the flip side of the fact that there's so much positive, hopeful news.
No pressure at all. Well, hopefully, I mean, this collaboration will help, will assist in that as we move forward together.
Sophie, if you could send one message directly to anyone affected by myeloma listening today, what would it be?
I think it's a message of hopefulness. Yes, myeloma remains an incurable cancer. That is true. But actually, we're at a point now where there are a lot of people living long and good lives with myeloma. If we could get to the point where it becomes a chronic condition, say like diabetes, that we manage, that is within horizon scanning. That's not an impossible ambition for the next few years. So I would just say, remain hopeful. It is a hopeful time.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's such a positive and wonderful way of explaining where we are in myeloma, because it is, as you say, a time of huge positivity.
So, Sophie, let's delve into you a little bit more for the last few minutes, if you don't mind. A quick fire round, a few light-hearted questions.
Singing. I have been waiting for about 40 minutes to talk about singing because as Sally knows,
true.
We've just got to get. I mean, I'm not sure. I think she's too good a singer to do karaoke, but let's we've got to get into that a bit. Sally, I'll leave it to you. Before I've sung on a few of these pods before, but I'm not going to do that now. I feel kind of.
I'm not going to sing now.
Don't be shy. Well, Sophie, if you change your mind and you fancy singing us a little ditty, you're very welcome. And we could have it on the podcast, and it'd be a pleasure. But okay, so quick fire round: opera or pop? I think I know the answer to this one. If you had to choose, opera.
Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish?
Taylor Swift.
Okay, that was neither. So I think I'll leave that.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Oh, yes, indeed.
When you're not listening to the Myeloma Minutes podcast, are there any other podcasts that you enjoy?
I've really got into podcasts, actually. So I listen to a range. There's something about, I'm a very auditory person. So, I mean, I listen to a lot of the, BBC and current affairs ones. They're very good.
So, Sophie, if you could, dial back in your life a little bit and think about those sliding doors moments where you saw, let's say, the advert for Myeloma UK or, the RNIB or whatever it may have been, and you could have chosen a different path. If you could do it all again, what do you think you'd do instead? What would you have loved to have done?
It's a really difficult one because I feel my life has sort of unfolded with lots of different opportunities. And if I'd chosen a different route at any point, then it would have been a different set of opportunities. I know this is a bit of a cop-out. It's like that interview question. When they say to you, where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? I've never been able to answer that question.
Yeah.
My brain doesn't work like that. And I guess if I go back, my mum was one of these people. She always said to me, don't close doors, keep opportunities open. And I've really held on to that as a sort of philosophy of life. So I know I'm not answering your question. It is a bit of a cop-out. But I just don't see life like that. I've seen, if you stay open to possibility, lots of good things start happening. And that's, I guess, how I've seen my life.
Very inspiring indeed. I'm going to hold on to that as well.
That is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And now, Sophie, I'm going to ask you about your Grammy. I hear you won a Grammy. Is correct? Because that is just amazing.
It is, but not me personally. So they used to do classical Grammys. And when I was in the US, I sang with the Atlanta Symphony Chorus, which is an amazing choir. And we did win, I think it was Best Classical Recording, and I think something for sound engineering for a recording of Vaughan Williams' Sea Symphony.
Oh, beautiful.
Wow.
Wow. In awe. Well, that leads nicely maybe onto our last quick-fire question, Sophie. Do you have a desert island disc or a collection in your mind that you'd like to take away with you?
I'd love to do desert island discs. I think it's a wonderful radio format. I'm never quite...
Well, after being on the Myeloma Minutes podcast, I mean, to be honest, it's an actual stepping stone.
Absolutely, I agree.
I'd expect a call from Lauren, within a few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think what I do, there's music that I associate with different people. So my dad loved jazz. I do not have a voice to sing jazz, but I would probably take some jazz just to remind myself of him. Oh. My mum had other sort of more niche interests. She liked Baroque era music, so sort of Handel and Bach. So I'd probably take a bit of that. I don't know. I just grew up in a household where my parents weren't musicians particularly. They certainly weren't professional musicians, but music was always part of my journey and my childhood. So I would really enjoy selecting whatever those discs were.
God, it's so interesting, isn't it? Every time I listen to it, I think of another one I'd chuck in there. Well, I think then, Sophie, we've quizzed you enough about yourself and your life. And thank you for providing such amazing insights on behalf of people living with myeloma and the people that we look after in clinic. And, it's just incredibly inspiring to know about the work that Myeloma UK does and then to hear about it from you. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So, Jam, we've been speaking for some time, haven't we, about how we were so keen to get Sophie to come and chat to us. And my goodness, that didn't disappoint, did it? It just honestly amazes me, the breadth of the work that Myeloma UK does and their reach as well. Really quite extraordinary. Never mind, Sophie and a Grammy and this and that. I mean, what a treat it was to speak to her today.
It really was. I mean, she was a wonderful guest, clearly a brilliant person to be leading this impressive organisation into the next era of myeloma care. And we heard from her so eloquently, thinking about prevention, understanding precursor conditions, and all the way at the other end, thinking about survivorship and carefully working in both areas and getting information. And of course, putting the patient at the heart of it, which is our mission on this podcast. And that's why we're so delighted that they are our official charity partner.
Couldn't get any better, really, could it? Yeah, let's see where this takes us going into the future. And we say this at the end of every podcast, but listeners, please reach out if you've got any thoughts or queries or suggestions or anything you'd like to feedback. And I'm sure Sophie, as well as the both of us, would be delighted to hear from you.
Absolutely, we would. It's been a great podcast. Great to see you, Sally, and I'll see you at the next one.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
This has been the Myeloma Minutes. We hope that you found today's pod engaging, interesting, and above all, useful and understandable. Please remember that this does not constitute medical advice. Thank you so much for listening. Please do feedback on what you've enjoyed and what you'd like more of. You can email us at themyelomaminutes@gmail.com, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye.